So we've reached letter H in my series about English vocabulary, and I want to use this opportunity to talk about some of the idioms we use in the language. Now, an idiom is a phrase that you can't easily understand, even though you may know the meaning of the individual words within it. Be easier if I give you an example. So when an English person talks about breaking the ice, chances are they're not talking about literally breaking the top of frozen water. Rather, they're talking about getting through that difficult first moment when you meet someone, getting through that social awkwardness. So you break the ice by telling a joke, or at a dinner party you might break the ice by offering someone a drink. Equally, someone might say, "It's all Greek to me." Now, this doesn't have anything to do with Greece at all. It means that they don't understand something. Modern technology, it's all Greek to me. Now, these are two idioms that have come to us via Shakespeare. However, there's another writer that has given the English language lots of idioms and also an adjective. H is for Homeric. H is for Homeric, and as I said, it's an adjective, and it can mean a few different things. First off, it can mean heroic, and it can also mean epic on an enormous scale. So let's take a look at uses of the word meaning both heroic and epic. So first off, we could say, in Gladiator, Russell Crowe plays Maximus Decimus Meridius, a larger-than-life Homeric character. So there we're saying that the character played by Russell Crowe is Homeric, heroic. In Gladiator, Russell Crowe plays Maximus Decimus Meridius, a larger-than-life Homeric character. But we can also use the word Homeric to mean huge and epic. So I could also say, globally, there has been a Homeric effort to develop a vaccine against COVID-19. Normally it takes years to develop vaccines, but because the efforts have been so Homeric, so epic, it seems that we've got there a lot quicker this time. Globally, there has been a Homeric effort to develop a vaccine against COVID-19. Now, Homeric can also have a third meaning, again an adjective, meaning relating to the words of Homer. So I could use Homeric in a sentence like this. One could argue, given its scope and its artistic ambition, that Game of Thrones belongs to the Homeric tradition of storytelling. So who was Homer, and what is the Homeric tradition of storytelling? Well, supposedly, Homer was a Greek writer living somewhere around 750 BC. But we've got no historical evidence to prove that. All we have to go on are the two epic poems that he left behind. One is the Iliad and the other is the Odyssey. Now, the Iliad deals with the story of Helen, who was either abducted by or eloped with Paris, a prince from the city of Troy. And this provoked the rage of the Greeks, who sent an entire army to go and rescue her back. They camped outside the city walls for something like 10 years before finally breaking into the city, sacking it, wrecking it, rescuing Helen, and heading back home. That's the Iliad. The Odyssey tells the story of Odysseus, one of the leading Greeks in the Iliad, and it tells how it took him 10 years to get back across the Mediterranean from Troy to his small kingdom in Ithaca. Today we still use the word Odyssey to describe an unexpectedly difficult journey. So if you said to me, "It's taken you 3 hours to get here from the airport," I might say, I've been on something of an odyssey. Anyway, let's move on to the idioms that we derive from these two works, starting with "the face that launched 1,000 ships." This is the phrase that's used to describe just how beautiful Helen was. Nobody more beautiful could be imagined or conceived, and it was her beauty that drove the Greeks to put together this huge army to go and rescue her from the hands of Paris in Troy. Now, we don't have any contemporary photography of Helen. For fairly obvious reasons, she's supposed to have lived 3,000 years ago. But I do have this Renaissance painting. Now, Helen there, on the right-hand side of the painting, is about to be killed by Aeneas. Now, Aeneas was a resident of Troy, and he's angry and he blames her for the fall of the city. But fortunately, he's about to be stopped in killing Helen by his mother, the goddess Aphrodite. Now, obviously, the relationship between mortals and gods back then was quite complicated. But anyway, this idiom, the face that launched 1,000 ships, is a way of expressing that someone simply couldn't be more beautiful. Now, possibly the most famous chapter in the Iliad is that of the Trojan horse. Having spent 10 years camped outside the city walls, the Greeks finally decided they needed a smarter plan, a cleverer plan to get inside Troy. So they sailed their fleet away, persuading the Trojans that they had finally withdrawn, and left a large wooden horse outside the city gates. The Trojans, thinking it was some kind of gift, brought the horse into the city. Then, under the cover of darkness, 30 Greek soldiers who had been hiding in the horse crept out and opened the city's gates, allowing the Greek army to enter, the fleet having returned under the cover of darkness. And so a Trojan horse is a way of tricking or using subterfuge to get into somewhere. And we still use the phrase today, particularly in terms of computer viruses. They're called Trojans. So you get an email that looks perfectly normal, and then you click on it, and then you realize that you've allowed some sort of malware to affect your operating system. So that is the Trojan horse. Next, we have Achilles' heel. Now, Achilles was the Greeks' best warrior, but it had been predicted, that he would die young. Knowing this prophecy, his mother Thetis took him to the magical river Styx and dipped his body in the water to give it protection. The only problem was that when she dipped his body in the water, she was holding his heel, she was holding him by the ankle, and so that part of his body was never protected. So finally, in the Iliad, when the Greeks broke into the city of Troy, Achilles was shot by a poisoned arrow in the heel by Paris, the very prince who had eloped with Helen, and that killed Achilles. And we use the phrase Achilles' heel to mean a weakness. So I could say the Achilles heel of a modern mobile phone is its battery life. They simply don't last all day. But it all comes from the story of Achilles' heel, his point of weakness. Next up, we have Cassandra, a princess of Troy and the sister of Paris. The god Apollo really liked her and made her an offer. He said that if they could get it together, become a couple, then he would give her the gift of prophecy, the ability to see into the future. And she agreed. But then, having received that gift and being able to see into the future, she then decided that she really didn't want to be with Apollo, and that really annoyed him. And so he put a curse on her. And the curse was that no one would ever believe her, so that even though she could see into the future, it was hopeless because there was nobody she could tell about it because nobody would believe her. And a Cassandra today is just that, someone who predicts the future but whom nobody believes. I think there's one in every office around the country. There's always someone who can predict what's going to happen but who everybody else ignores. That's a Cassandra. Siren song is an idiom that means seductive but dangerous, and it comes from the Odyssey. Sirens were a cross between birds and women, and they were capable of creating the most beautiful music that they would use to lure sailors to their deaths on the rocks around the island where they lived. Odysseus wanted to hear the music, But unsurprisingly, he didn't want to die, so he instructed his crew to tie him to the mast of his boat so that he couldn't move, and to cover their own ears so they couldn't hear the sound of the siren song. And this way he was able to listen to the music without leading his crew to their deaths. Now, we might use the phrase siren song when talking about a seductive sales pitch. So let's say you're in a car showroom. You should ignore the siren song of the salesman. Otherwise, you'll end up leaving with a much more expensive car than you'd intended. Siren song, seductive but dangerous. The final idiom we're going to talk about today is to choose between Scylla and Charybdis. In the Odyssey, Odysseus has to sail through a very narrow and dangerous stretch of water, thought to be the stretch of water between the south of Italy and Sicily. Now, in the book, the dangers of this passage of water are represented on one side by Scylla, a six-headed monster, and on the other by Charybdis, a whirlpool capable of dragging a boat to the bottom of the sea. So clearly neither choice is good, hence to choose between Scylla and Charybdis. Modern speakers of English have adapted the expression and are more likely to say that they are between a rock and a hard place, But the meaning is pretty much the same. Other speakers might say that they have to choose between the lesser of two evils. But all of these idioms are derived from the original to choose between Scylla and Charybdis. H was for Homeric. Now, even if you never use the word yourself, I hope you'll agree that it was a good opportunity to take a look at some idioms in English that we still use today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.